Hi folks, it's Gregory here. You're watching Not Only Code, a channel where I share advice on how to become better, more successful software developer. Today I have a personal story to tell, and I will talk about how I landed my first couple of jobs as a programmer. Because even though I have a traditional background, I studied computer science, the way I got my first couple of jobs was not very traditional. Please note that what I'm talking about here refers to years 2009 to 2015, so it may not apply in today's jobs market. It was very different back then, but I think it's still valuable to see that there are different ways to get a job, and maybe you can get some inspiration on how to approach it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel, and let's start. Job number one, it was year 2009 and I was a university student. I was starting my third year at university, and I figured out that if I skip some lectures that were not obligatory, and if I swap some classes with other students, I could squeeze in my classes into 2.5 days, which would allow me to get a part-time job or an internship where I could work for 20 to maybe 30 hours a week. And I wasn't a great programmer back then. I didn't have much, practical experience. I mostly learned programming at university. I learned some basics of Delphi in Java. And also I didn't have any real network to reach out to. So it was a bit difficult for me to find something, especially at bigger companies that have more structured internships or jobs, and they don't want anyone to go there for 20 hours a week on and off to do some junior work. So I decided to find a job at some smaller company because they're usually more flexible. And one of the companies that I found was Netguru. Back then it was a very new, very small company, maybe around 10 people, and I found their job offer that they were looking for Ruby on Rails developers. They were not looking for juniors, they were looking for mid-level and senior developers. But I thought, hey, Ruby on Rails is not that popular in Poland yet, so I guess they struggle finding developers, and maybe I can learn this framework pretty fast. I knew a little bit about it because a friend of mine showed it to me and said that this is a fantastic way to write web applications. So I said, hey, why not? Let's give it a try. And instead of applying, I opened GoldenLine, which back then was, or maybe still is, a Polish equivalent of LinkedIn, and I sent a message to one of the co-founders of that company saying, hey, I'm Gregory, I'm a university student, and I don't know Ruby on Rails, but I promise I will learn really fast. How about you give me an internship for 1 or 2 months, and then we can decide if you can hire me or not. And a couple of days later, I got a response saying, all right, why don't you come by to our office and talk to our CTO? And I did, and we talked a little bit about programming. We talked a bit about what's my plan, what are they doing as a software house, and well, I started a part-time job there. As I said, back then it was a small company, maybe 10 people, but the founders were really smart guys, and over a couple of years, they grew the company enormously. Right now, I think there are 500 people or something like that. Job number two, it was early 2012, maybe late 2011. At that time, I lived in Spain. I went there for student exchange. It was my last year of university. I decided to explore the world a little bit, and I didn't have many classes. I mostly focused on my master thesis, and I had tons of free time. And I decided that I could use some more money because Spain was more expensive than Poland, and that I could get some more professional experience. So I decided to find a part-time job. It was challenging because first I didn't speak native Spanish, and in Spain right now people speak quite good English, but it's still mostly required to speak Spanish in professional environments. And I didn't have experience with popular languages like Java or C#, and I couldn't find any job opportunities for Ruby or JavaScript developers. So that was a bit challenging, but what happened a few months before is that at one of the technical conferences that I had attended with my colleagues from Netguru, a friend of mine introduced me to a guy that he knew that lived in the same city in Spain where I was going to. And I talked to that guy, and he told me, hey, if you ever look for some help, if you want to see the city or something, just reach out to me. He left me his email address. And I thought, okay, well, we'll see. So here I was looking for a job, and I decided to reach out to him to check maybe he knows some companies that have some opportunities for Ruby developers that I couldn't find. So I dropped him a message saying, "Hi, I'm Gregory. I'm not sure if you remember me, but we met a couple months ago via our common friend. And right now I'm in Valencia. I have a little bit of spare time and I could get some part-time job. Maybe you know someone who's hiring?" And a couple of days later, he replied me, "Actually, I'm hiring. Why don't you come by to the office and see?" So I went there. I had a pair programming with a couple of developers there, and they say, "Okay, sure, why not?" So we agreed that I would work there for a couple of months while I was still living in Spain. That company at the time was maybe 50 people, but now, almost 10 years later, it grew a lot. It's called Flywire, and it's one of the technical unicorns in Europe, so it's worth more than $1 billion. So yeah, I worked there for a couple of months while I was living in Spain. It was a great experience, pretty short, but really good to work in such company. And well, I had a chance to meet a founder who turned that small company into a unicorn, so that was really great. Job number 3. So in the year 2012, after I left Spain, I decided to move back to Poland for a while, and I talked to a bunch of companies. I was no longer a student. I could get a full-time job. And one of the companies that I talked to was Fyber. That was a Berlin-based company that used to be a client of Netguru, my first company. And normally that's not allowed, that the client cannot hire people from software house for a certain period of time, just to, prevent this abuse where they are poaching people from software houses. But because I no longer worked at Netguru, and it was almost a year difference now, so the contract clauses expired, etc., I could join them. And I talked to them and say, "Hey, I'm on the market again. I know the system, I know the people. I think that, it would be a good match." So that was a pretty easy hire. I didn't have to go through any job interview. They just knew me because I worked there a year before. So they just hired me almost immediately. Job number 4, freelancing. So it was year 2014. I was traveling around the world. I had a bit of a burnout before that. That's something for a different episode. And I decided to do some side gigs to have some additional income so that I could travel a bit more. And I found a couple of clients. I found clients via Odesk, that is now called Upwork. I found some clients via conferences that I attended and even spoke at. And for 1 year, I was focusing on freelancing. So I had a couple of clients. I worked remotely. I stayed in New Zealand, Australia. I stayed also in Europe a little bit, and I worked for clients from all over the world. And the last one for today, job number 5. So in 2014, I was traveling around the world, and in order to stay up to date with the industry, but also to meet some interesting people, I attended a bunch of tech meetups and conferences. So I attended some events in Taiwan, in Spain, in Philippines. And towards the end of the year, I decided that I want to get a full-time job either in Melbourne, Australia, or in Singapore, because both these cities made really great impression on me when I visited them as a tourist. It wasn't as easy as finding a job in EU because I needed a visa. But I thought, Ruby on Rails is getting really popular. There's a huge demand for Ruby programmers right now. And I was a decent programmer. I could prove my skills. I had some experience. I knew how to build web applications, so I surely would find something. And how I found this job was kind of via Twitter. So one of the organizers of the tech conference that I had attended in Singapore tweeted that his friends are looking for a Ruby programmer to join their newly founded startup. So I reached out to that organizer and asked him if he could connect me with the company and if they were hiring foreigners. He said he didn't know if they were hiring foreigners, but he just connected me with one of the founders of that company. And long story short, a couple of weeks later, after sending them my resume and doing programming exercise, I got the offer, I signed the contract, and later I moved to Singapore, where I stayed for 4 years. And that company, just like a couple of previous ones that I worked for, started as a very small company, and right now it's a really large and great place to work. So yeah, as you can see from my first 5 jobs, I mostly got them via cold emails or via references. Later in my career, I had some jobs where I applied the traditional way via website, but as you can see, this is not the only way to get a job. So I'm not saying that this will work for you, especially that the market right now is very different, but I think it's worth giving it a try to reach out to smaller companies because they're usually more flexible and you can get some jobs via references. So it's really helpful to meet some people, to attend some events, to maybe give lightning talk or some small presentation at the conference. So yeah, that's it for today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and see you next week. Stay tuned.